Today I'm talking about The Circus from 1927. It's a Charlie Chaplin film. He wrote, directed, and produced it. He was actually nominated for 3 Academy Awards in 3 separate categories for it. All to Charlie Chaplin, because he did everything to make this movie. But the Oscar committee decided before they began the voting or something that they would just take Charlie Chaplin off the vote and give him a special award instead. Being that the first Oscars was the only all-silent Oscars, it kind of makes sense because Charlie Chaplin kind of made silent movies what they were. And he was a well-known perfectionist, which I think is kind of interesting because being that it's comedy, and I feel a lot of comedy, especially nowadays, has a lot to do with improv and stuff. Okay, well, the story goes like this. In this movie, the main character is this young woman. Well, it's Charlie Chaplin, of course, but it's also this young woman who's the stepdaughter to the circus ringleader, or the man who owns the circus, who's like totally evil and just taking advantage of her and also taking advantage of Charlie Chaplin once he shows up. Well, then Charlie comes in. Oh, and they're having this problem when their clowns aren't funny. Like, no one laughs at the clowns. People are just always yelling at them, pretty much. The audiences, I mean. But then Charlie comes in, and like anytime he goes in the middle of the ring, he just creates a whole bunch of accidents. Everyone in the audience loves it. But they realize that Charlie Chaplin doesn't realize that he's a huge star right away. So the ringleader decides to just hire him on as a janitor pretty much, but they still put him in the ring, and then he like causes a big mess and a big ruckus, and that just creates even more people to come to their circus and stuff. So they're making a lot of money off of him, but still just paying him like he's a janitor because he doesn't even realize. Until the stepdaughter to the ringleader finally tells him, and there's kind of like a romance, or like it's kind of a hinted that there's a romance going on between her and Charlie, but then it turns out she's in love with the tightrope walker. But by that point, Charlie's figured out that he's the moneymaker and he's getting paid He's getting paid more regularly for his acts, but because of that, he gets a little cocky and gets kind of less funny because of it. And so he tries to do this tightrope walking act. But right before that, he releases a bunch of monkeys, so like he gets to the top of the tightrope and there's a bunch of monkeys crawling over him and stuff. But he gets out of it okay, and then the young woman and her tightrope walking boyfriend, they run away from the circus to join civilization. Like I said, Charlie Chaplin was a perfectionist, which I think is interesting just because he obviously knew funny, you know? He knew how to make people laugh. He knew the ins and outs of silent movie-making comedies, or silent comedy movie-making, whatever order that should be in, I don't know. But I think the reason he knew he had to be a perfectionist is because comedy is all about timing, especially slapstick comedy, and people have to be on their mark at the right time so that they can get the pie in the face at the right time so they can fall over and do everything like that. In fact, they worked with monkeys on this was a little surprising because I'm sure they were hard to control. But also because of that, I think it's really hard to go wrong with a Charlie Chaplin movie. As long as you know, what you're getting into with the slapstick comedy and everything. But they're always funny. The jokes are always original. And the timing is always on. I mean, that's what you get when you have a perfectionist director, is everything comes out not quite perfect, but nearly there. Like I said, it's hard to go wrong with Charlie Chaplin, and like, this one isn't really that much different from any other Charlie Chaplin movie I've seen. I mean, at least ones with the tramp, I mean. That was his character, his on-screen silent persona. Because they always kind of have a familiar feel to them, you know. He always comes into some new location. There's always some girl he falls in love with, but she likes him, but she never really loves him. I think maybe it happened once, I forget. Everywhere he goes, just random stuff happens to him. Sometimes it's really good stuff, but oftentimes it's not. But he always makes do and always like figures it out. And hilarity ensues. That's like the mantra of a Charlie Chaplin silent comedy anyway, just hilarity ensues. And he did a whole lot for the silent era of movies. I mean, Charlie Chaplin, like, helped to popularize them for one thing, but because of how good he was, like, other people tried to rise to the challenge. Like, that's why we have Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd as well. Just having these great silent comedians who all kind of popped up around him. Like, Charlie Chaplin was really one of the greats. He's one of the greatest things to grace the silver screen. And most of his movies weren't very long. I think this one was 72 minutes, which is particularly short even for a silent movie. But he always used every second. it felt like. It was always entertaining or interesting, or like just showed you like just enough to get you to the next joke, basically. And like the story itself, I mean, I think that's partly why the stories were always so similar, because it was never really about the story. It was always just about, so let's see what crazy antics the tramp is up to this time. And even though, because he was such a perfectionist, it probably wasn't very fun to make these movies. But they make movies that are incredibly fun to watch. At only 72 minutes, you will not be bored for a single minute. Also, I'm pretty sure Charlie Chaplin was one of the silent actors who did all their own stunts. Not entirely sure about that. I know Buster Keaton was. Pretty sure Charlie Chaplin was too. I know Buster Keaton said it was, like in one interview or another, that it was very important to him that he did all of his own stunts because he felt that that was part of the comedy, you know, just if it was like suddenly a stunt man coming in to like sell the joke for him that wouldn't be good enough, or that was never good enough for him. And I'm pretty sure Charlie Chaplin had a similar ideal about it. Was there anything I didn't like about it? I feel like maybe there was something I didn't like about it, but I can't quite remember what it was now. I guess there were a couple of scenes here and there where just kind of like doing that gimmicky, showy stuff that I was talking about in some of the other reviews from the first Academy Awards already, just in that movies were still fairly new and they weren't readily available all over the country like they are now. So like sometimes going to see a movie was like a really big event for you, you know. Traveled all the way to the city in a horseless carriage or whatever. You're going to tell them about this for years. You saw an elephant on screen or whatever. This one actually did have an elephant too. And monkeys and like other circus animals and stuff like that. And it did like a couple things, like especially in the early bit where it's kind of just showing you the clowns and stuff. It was just like, here's an actual circus act that you can watch on screen, you know. Didn't really do much for the story outside of set the scene a little bit, but being that the movie's called The Circus, you probably assumed it was in a circus. But it was like just a few scenes like that, just that like just slowed down the story to snail's pace. And it's like, being that the movie's only 72 minutes, I guess I could forgive it for a little padding. And also everything else about it was just so enjoyable and fun and funny, you know, because like I said, it's hard to go wrong with a Charlie Chaplin movie, at least a silent comedy, like I said, just because you can be sure that it's at least going to be entertaining, if not funny as well. So I'll probably just give this a rating of 10 out of 10 and say that it was a very good movie. And if you haven't seen any Charlie Chaplin silent comedies, this is a pretty good one to start with, or whatever. I would recommend any of his movies, like any of them. Even the talkies he did, like The Great Dictator. Alright, as always, please like and subscribe. I do a video every day, or try to. Sometimes multiple ones if it's just a bunch of these reviews, but that'll probably slow down after the Oscars are over. Unless I run out of Oscar movies first. Well, I guess seeing that this is from the first Oscars and that there's 94 years of this stuff, I'll never be done.